Yo, I'm telling you right now, you do not want to miss a second of today's Philadelphia 76ers now because there is so much to get to as the NBA storylines are really ramping up. NBA draft at the end of this month going to be here before we know it. And right after that, NBA free agency. So coming up, Joel Embiid at the NBA Finals this weekend, side-eyeing Paul George. Are these two going to be future teammates in the city of brotherly love? And then also coming up, continues to look like the Philadelphia 76ers really want OG Anunoby, and they're willing to pay up. First, do you want Paul George on this Sixers team? We've seen a bevy of comments anytime we've talked about this subject. A lot of people saying no. Some people saying yes. We will be responding in the comment section, so let's debate it. I told you, you don't want to miss what we have in store on today's show, so let's get it cracking. And we start with story number one as Paul George rumors are heating up. Brian Windhorst dropping a bombshell report on Paul George over the weekend, and that coming on top of the fact that Joel Embiid was on the set surprisingly at the NBA Finals for Game 4. Gave a little side-eye to Paul George when talking about the Sixers pursuing him potentially or other free agents in free agency. First, here's what Windy had to say, and Brian Windhorst has been in the news after his hot take on Luka Doncic, which motivated him to come out guns a-blazing in Game 4 to make that series 3-1, shifting back to Boston for tonight. Monday night, Game 5. Windy on the Paul George front, though. The two teams that are expected to have a serious look at him are the 76ers, who have opened up cap space to give him a max deal over $50 million to start, and the Orlando Magic. Windhorst also adding that Paul George and the Clippers, quote, not on the same page in contract negotiations either. PG and the Clippers, they have had months, we are talking months, to come to an agreement on a contract. And what did the Clippers do? They paid the off-injured Kawhi Leonard, who's never available for that team, over Paul George, who's dealt with injuries, but has been far more available as compared to Kawhi. And we know that the Sixers, with all of this money, with Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, the two stars already existing on this roster, Nick Nurse as the head coach, they want to give Paul George a max. They're desperate to give Paul George a max. And the Clippers don't want to pay PG-13 more than Kawhi Leonard. The Sixers max deal, let's give you a refresher here, can go upwards of 4 years, $212 million, $53 million average annual value. Kawhi's deal, 3 years, $152, $50.5 million per year. And if the Clippers don't want to give Paul George more than Kawhi, and you can see those figures right below me if you're just listening to the show, the Sixers can give him a much more lofty contract. So Paul George, even though he's a California guy, if he's looking to compete for a championship, have a great role on a championship contender, and make more money, get out of LA, where the Clippers continue to choke more so than Philadelphia, come to a great basketball and financial situation with the Philadelphia 76ers. Everything is there for Paul George. Now it's up for him to take it. And then we get to what I referenced a little bit earlier in case you missed it. Embiid on the set, NBA Countdown, ESPN, prior to Game 4, saying, quote, hopefully this offseason we'll find a way to get better and, add some pieces. Giving that side eye to Paul George like a dude would give the side eye to a girl that he's trying to land. I think that's somewhat significant because to me it says that Joel Embiid also interested in the thought of bringing Paul George to Philadelphia. So, Chip, a lot to take away from that, obviously. We've known that the Sixers have been hot in the pursuit of Paul George. Now you have Embiid saying this. More reporting for Brian Windhorst confirming that Philadelphia is really interested in PG-13.
Yeah, it is really heating up as we approach free agency here in just about a month. Look, what are the facts that we know, right? One, the Clippers, they're not going to give Paul George more than what Kawhi got. If they were going to, it would have happened already, right? The Sixers, we know for a fact, are willing to give Paul George a max. Now, am I happy with that? Are a lot of Sixers fans happy with that? Maybe you don't agree with it, but it's just the facts that they're willing to give him $53 million a year. So when you take in the fact that Paul George can get more money from the Sixers, that Joel Embiid is out here low-key addressing these rumors, having fun with it in front of a national audience at the NBA Finals, sitting right next to him, giving him the side eye. Even Kendrick Perkins was egging it on a little bit, like maybe that piece is sitting right next to you. And of course, neither of them really reacted because, tampering and whatnot. We know the Sixers have dealt with that in the past. But look, if there's one move I had to predict happens for the Sixers, it's signing Paul George. It really seems like, I don't want to call it a done deal or anything. Obviously, Paul George, he calls LA home. But man, the more and more stuff that comes out, we haven't heard a single report that's like, the Clippers, they might actually be willing to pay Paul George. Everything coming out is they don't want to pay him, which is surprising to me because, they're opening that new arena and all that. But man, the more and more we hear, the more and more likely it seems Paul George is going to be a 76er.
Fill in the blank. Sixers hot in the pursuit in these recruiting streets. We even saw images over the weekend. Is Nick Nurse meeting with LeBron James at a high-rise restaurant in Philadelphia? It's Elton Brand, but either way, it's rumor season. Fill in the blank for us, by the way. Embiid, Maxey, and Paul George would be a top blank trio in the NBA. Let us know down in the comments. Coming up next, we covered the Paul George front. Now it's time to talk OG Anunoby. Could the Sixers steal OG away from the New York Knicks? I'm not going to steal one of these hats because it's impossible to steal it from Fanatics. That wouldn't be good. 76ers Now talk show host Chase Sr. steals a hat from Fanatics. It's not a physical store, right? It's an online store, but I do want to buy it, and you can buy it too at chatsports.com/76ers draft hats. These hats available both in the flat brim new era style and then the dad hat new era style. Love the color scheme, love the look, love the logo. Get yours today, chatsports.com/76ers draft hats. We'll put that link down below in the show notes and attached to the pinned comment of today's video. Do the Sixers want OG Anunoby? Michael Scotto, Hoops Hype, reporting that the Sixers could offer Anunoby $35 million per year, which, by the way, still cheaper than what Tobias Harris made last year. Here's what Scotto had to say in his Hoops Hype column. The league-wide expectation is that OG Anunoby will return to the Knicks. The question is, for how much? From executives I've talked to around the league, Anunoby's floor appears to be $35 million, and his ceiling is a max contract. Philadelphia will be looking for a 3-and-D small forward and has the max cap space to make the offer if they believe they'll miss out on their top target, Paul George. Two general managers told me they'd pay Anunoby $35 million annually, and that's a max that would be tough because of his injury history. That is the concern with Anunoby in giving him $35 million upwards of a max contract. He's a really good player. I like how he's developed. Nick Nurse has familiarity with him. He's an excellent defender. When the Knicks made that trade, plus minus, lineup combination, win-loss record, they're one of the best teams in the entire NBA. But he does remind me of Kawhi Leonard, where if something's nagging, something's hurting, something's ailing him, he's going to sit out and rarely is going to play through that. And then you saw the series against the Pacers really took a turn because Anunoby in Game 2 went out with that hamstring injury. And then the Knicks never were really able to recover from that injury because they simply weren't the same basketball team. Here's what Begley had to say on SNY on OG Anunoby. If the Knicks go well beyond $35 million, it's going to be because Philadelphia, OKC, or another team with cap space coming in with a significant offer that forces the Knicks to exceed that. I think that's around where you'd expect it, but if there's a curveball there and Daryl Morey comes in and throws a big offer at Anunoby that forces the Knicks to go over the top, I think they have to because of what they gave up in the deal to get Anunoby here. They're committed to having him here long term. If I had to guess, I think there would be some injury protections in the deal or some stipulation with games played. I think that what ends up happening, Sixers are going to go all in on Paul George. And then OG Anunoby is kind of that backup plan. They really want that 3-and-D wing. And you might not look at Paul George as a 3-and-D wing. He's not the prototypical 3-and-D wing like you look at in the sense of an OG Anunoby or a Josh Hart. But what does Paul George do really well? Which Daryl Morey said at his end of the season press conference. We want a wing who can score and defend. Paul George can score and he can defend. And he can take that three and he can D up. And then there's Stephen Bondy, New York Post, with some more intel on the Anunoby front. One X factor in the Anunoby sweepstakes, Paul George. If George doesn't go to Philadelphia or OKC, those two teams will have to spend their money to get somebody. Anunoby is an attractive piece to bring to those two teams. It depends on the market, but I'd be surprised if the Knicks don't bring Anunoby back one way or another. If I'm the Knicks, I'm attaching incentives to games played because of his injury history, as you mentioned. A lot of that is on what the competition is offering. The bottom line, I'd be very surprised if Anunoby doesn't come back to the Knicks. I like that thought process of the incentives for games played on the contract. You want that max deal, OG? You want $35 million per? Well, you're going to have to reach a certain amount of games played there, Chip. I think that's a good way to maybe get him in there and then give the team some insurance too.
It's a very interesting situation with OG because we know the Sixers' top target is Paul George. And we know, at least you'd assume, the Knicks are going to do whatever they want, wherever they can, to get OG back because, again, they traded so much for him and he was such a big part of their winning. I mean, they were almost unbeatable when they had their full healthy lineup, especially when they first traded for him. They had Julius Randle, OG, Jalen Brunson.
Yep.
Even without Randle, I mean, we saw how good they were with OG. But the Sixers, say you do strike out on Paul George, right? He goes back to the Clippers or maybe goes somewhere else. You know, how much will you throw at him? Because $35 million, I don't think gets it done. I think the Knicks easily offer him that much. But then it becomes, how much do you throw at OG? Because he's such an interesting player. Not your typical superstar max guy who's going to give you 25, 30 a night. But what he does for a winning team is so impactful.
Yep.
He's sort of like a mega role player in a way where, he's not this, good role guy. He's a great role guy and he really excels at what he does. Perimeter defense, interior defense, he can shoot the three. We saw him off the dribble this year, even develop that aspect of his game. So how much does a player like him command? Are you paying $50 million for a player like OG who's not going to be an all-star? It's really tough. And does Daryl Morey say, how confident is he that the Knicks are going to do whatever they can to keep him? Because does he offer OG 40-something a year, knowing, the Knicks will match it no matter what? What happens if they don't? And all of a sudden, you're stuck paying OG Anunoby $40+ million for the next few years when it's probably a little bit much for him considering his injury history. It's a very interesting situation.
The difference there between 35 and 50 is pretty drastic. And then we've also talked about this on the show. The Sixers could play the leverage game, and they could offer OG a lot to force the Knicks to overpay. And then if the Knicks in turn are desperate, the Sixers, do they come out as winners because then the Knicks pay OG $45 to $50 million? Going to be fascinating. This is one of the more anticipated off seasons around the NBA that I can remember in quite some time, certainly for Philadelphia. I mean, going back to the process years, this is the most interested I've been in a Sixers offseason in quite some time. So pick one player to pursue among the two players that we talked about on the show today, PG for Paul George, OG for OG Anunoby. Let us know, and thanks for watching.